Hi, everybody, and welcome to the irrigation session. There's going to be two sessions really in one. I'm going to do sort of home irrigation, a home system that pretty much anybody can do. And then Manny and Wendy, I'm sorry. Manny and Wendy from County Parks will do the second session, and it'll be more complicated than mine, so and require a great deal more skill. So we'll go ahead and get started. Can everybody on Zoom hear me okay? If you raise your hand, that would be helpful.
The chat function is also.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till the end of my session, and then I'll answer some questions, and then Wendy and Manny will have questions at the end of theirs. And I'll try not to be too nervous. It's not progressing. Let's see. Just a bit about me. I am not an irrigation specialist. I am a plant person. The reason I got into this irrigation is because it was just killing me that people were not watering their plants and they were dying. And some of the obstacles to it were cost and level of complicatedness to put an irrigation system in, and difficulty finding people to install irrigation systems. So I studied with a man who'd been doing this drip irrigation, or micro irrigation as it's also called, and learned how to put these systems in for my clients. And they were very inexpensive. I could put a whole system in one day, and it was easy for them to run it and fix it. So that's how I got into this. And we're going to talk about why should you irrigate? What is micro irrigation / drip irrigation? The pros and cons of this system, how to assess your watering needs, how to design your system, ordering parts, installing the system, troubleshooting, and winterizing. And we're going to do all of that in less than half an hour. So you're not going to walk out of here knowing how to put a system in, but you're going to have some idea of what your options are and what you need to do to get more information. We live in a desert, right? Should we irrigate? Should we be using water? Well, if you're going to plant, then you have to water. Even native plants and cactus need some water at some point, particularly when they're young or you've just planted them for the first 3 years. Many native plants can survive with very little water, but not all native plants. There are some native plants that like a lot of water. So know your plants, know your soil. Depending on what kind of soil you have, you'll water more or less. And not all irrigation systems are created equal, which you'll learn tonight. And having the right system and a good design will allow you to water the least amount for the most effect. So these are just some pictures of different ways of doing the system that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I probably need a pointer, but these are hooked up to a hose bib, and they generally have a backflow preventer, a filter, a pressure regulator if you have more than 50 PSI, a timer, and then this drip irrigation, which I have samples of over here.
You can use this.
Oh, great. Oh, you're so handy. So this one is mine right now, and probably not exactly what you want, because I went for the bare bones. And we just bought our house. I just put the garden in, and I'll be redoing the whole system this spring. This system is one that has several zones. This one has several zones on this one timer, but everybody's getting the same amount of water. This one, they're getting different amounts of water on different days. And then the nice thing about it is you can create little watering rings for pots. And so it's great for that. The pros and cons of it, the pros are it's easy and cost effective. You can put one of these systems in, like if you went for all the bells and whistles for about $600 for a regular sized garden like we have in most houses here. It's great for home gardens and vegetable container gardens. It's really water efficient. There's usually no water up in the air. It's adaptable. You can pop in and out of the line to change it as your garden changes. And you can incorporate this into more complex systems. It's easy to find and fix leaks and issues because all the pipe is above ground, nothing is buried, and it's simple. The cons are it really isn't very good for lawn. It has a limited number of channels or zones on each timer, which can be problematic. It's attached to the hose bib, so you can hear it come on and off, especially if your hose bib is on your bedroom wall and you have it coming on at 5 in the morning, you will hear klunk when it comes on. There is a risk of it leaking at the hose bib or of it backflowing into your house water system, so you need a backflow preventer of some sort. And if you're into super fancy and computerized, this is not your game. So I have a couple videos. This was just downtown Los Alamos, and I'm not knocking anybody, but there's water up in the air. There's water puddling. It's hard to stay on top of these systems. This is my system at my faucet, and I just hit the manual button. You can't really hear it, but it just clicks on. It'll just take a minute, and I'm gonna go down the line and show you what it looks like when it's coming out of the system. That's my incredible hyssop. I had the most amazing hyssop this year. So these guys I just put in, so I put little watering rings around them, and you can see they're inline emitter, and it is just dripping like that, right at the soil interface. Normally I cover everything with mulch, so there's very little loss of water. That's the 1/4 inch, and this is the 1/2 inch pipe. And it is just barely dripping out of there. You've learned a lot already about assessing your watering needs, so we'll just go through it quickly. You need to know what type of soil you have. Is it sandy loam? Is it clay? Because water will either run right through or it'll hold more. So that'll have a lot to do with how long you're running your system for and how often. You need to know your plants well. Do they want or need water once they're established? Don't water them much if they don't want it. If you have a slope on your property or lots of raised beds and pots, that's going to slow down your water flow, and you either want to divide that up or run it for longer. Running it longer can be a problem closer to your hose because then those plants get really wet. So it's better if you can split up into more zones. How old are the plantings? I find here that for about 3 years, things need more water than you think they would. Are they exposed to sun and wind? They dry out faster with both. What kind of water pressure do you have? You want to have between 30 and 50 PSI for most irrigation systems. Around 40 is pretty slow through a system. And if it's more than 60, you definitely need a pressure regulator because it'll just blow the system. You want to know the gallons per hour. of your system. This drip irrigation has anywhere from 0.5 gallon per hour to 1.5 gallons per hour, and that makes a big difference. And then what time of year is it? Plants here need water all year. Things dry out a lot in the winter and people don't think about that, but they need less in the winter, and you're going to have to hand water because you don't want to keep these systems hooked up if we're having freezes. And just quickly testing your soil. I think you've learned this already, and testing your water pressure. There are lots of different ways, but a hose end pressure gauge is really the easiest. And then there's a bucket method, and I've included a live link for that, so you can look at that. That just is filling your bucket, seeing how fast it takes to fill a 5 gallon bucket, basically. Then designing your system. This is the hardest part of the whole thing. Just like designing your garden, like Ruth talked to us about, you really have to think. Where are your hose bibs? You want to have at least 2 hose bibs. Where are the impermeable surfaces like driveways? Because you don't want to have to dig under your driveway for this system. So if you can figure out how to avoid the impermeable surfaces by putting one system in the back and one system in the front, for example, at my house. It does, sorry, I'm nervous. It does help to cluster your plants, but that's not always realistic. What I'm starting to get to are putting in several zones. One zone for my trees and established shrubs that are going to be watered more deeply, less often. And one zone for my perennials and annuals that are going to be watered more often for shorter periods of time. I think that's the easiest way to handle the problem of different watering needs. It's just hard to cluster plants. Then are you going to have one or several zones? Are you going to water in short spurts daily or longer watering 1 to 2 times weekly? Are you going to have front and or back areas? Is it going to be all the drip emitter? Or are you going to need some sprayers? Like I have a little meadow, so I do have a 360-degree sprayer for the meadow when it's sprouting in the spring, and then I pretty much let it go. Do you have raised beds or potted plants or container plants, and how are you going to deal with those? I'll give you some ideas, and then I already dealt with that. So here's Ruth's beautiful design. And I tried to draw in a system, but I am a terrible drawer. So I'm just going to walk through it. So one problem with this house is we have an impermeable here, we have impermeable here, and we have impermeable here. So what happens if our hose bib is right here? It's going to be tricky, and you have to think about it. And then you've got impermeable back here, and hopefully your hose bib is here or here. And then there's some slope here. So we want to consider that and maybe divide that slope into 2 different zones so that the water's not pushing all the way up the slope at one time. Then you've got established trees and shrubs. We have some perennials in there. We have a vegetable garden. So we've got a bit to think about. And what I thought when I was looking at it is maybe my hose bib is here, which would be painful, but I could figure it out. I could probably dig under this sidewalk and put my irrigation through some sort of pipe, like an HDPE or PVC pipe, so it doesn't get crushed. And then I would run my system here, here, and probably to about here. That I'd have 2 zones in the front. I'd have one for trees and shrubs, one for perennials, one for these veggie boxes, and then one to handle this area. And then I would have another zone that comes around and feeds this area because I'm not going to get through the driveway from the front. And another zone for the trees and shrubs, and it would end right about here. I could have 2 zones in the back and 2 zones in the front. And I think that would pretty well handle this design. For the vegetable beds, I use 1/4 inch and I come up into the bed and then I make a 1/4 inch. Oh my God, I gotta run. All right. Drip Works, which is where I order all my stuff, but that's my preference. They have already designed landscape plans. And if it might work for your house, when you click on it, it'll put everything you need into your basket. You don't even have to think about it. And they'll send you a layout. So that's great. Ordering the parts, you're all going to be able to access this. You could go back through it. This is my sort of standing order for a basic system. And then you're going to need to, DripWorks, I don't know if they do the backflow preventers now. You can get everything you need at DripWorks, or you can go to Lowe's and try to figure it out. And I get overwhelmed, like seeing all these boxes and I don't know what it is. So for me, this is the easiest way to go. Installing it, the most important thing is to think it through before you cut everything. Really walk it through, look at your design. Make sure you've closed off all open ends. Make sure everything is getting water. Look for leaks, run it for a week and check your soil moisture. And just a simple moisture meter like this will do that. You want to make sure you're getting water like 3-4 inches down. And then adjust as needed. Start at the hose bib and work your way around. These are for people on Zoom, so you can see what the parts look like. And then I brought actual parts so you can touch them and get a sense of what they feel like. Most of them are compression fittings. So having a thermos of hot water or hand warmers to warm, especially the 1/2 inch pipe, because it can be tricky. And you're just wiggling it into the compression fitting. Troubleshooting, water isn't coming out of the line. Did you turn the water on at the hose bib? Did you turn the timer on? Because it won't come out unless the timer's on. Is the filter on in the right direction? That one really took me a minute to figure out. Is there a kink in the line? These pipes will kink and then no water will go through them. And is the line actually connected? Sometimes we forget to hook them up. Then if the end of the line isn't getting enough water, it could be that you don't have enough pressure. It could be that it's not running long enough. Maybe you're trying to water too much in the time that you've set. Try to split it into 2 or more zones. Your slope may be too much for your pressure. And if you spring a leak, it's very easy to fix this system. It's right above the ground. You just cut it and repair it with a compression fitting. If there's a leak at the faucet, it's probably the washer, or you haven't screwed everything on tight enough. And then winterizing, I flush my lines. I use these male end caps. These are compression fittings and the lid comes off. You can use figure 8s and just bend your thing, but I think these are really elegant. I like them. And they don't pop off. So you flush it just by running the water through it, let all that drain out, put the cap back on so you don't get stuff climbing into your line over the winter. Turn the water off at the hose bib, disconnect your timer, take out the batteries. That's really important because they'll corrode and destroy your timer. And store it in a dry place where you can see it. I have so many clients lose their timers. And then all that you already know. And in the spring, just put new batteries in the timer. Don't use your old batteries because you don't know how much juice was left in them. Flush your system, reset your timers, and test for leaks and that water is coming out. And that's it, really. These are resources for planning. The drip work videos are amazing. The sample plans are great for getting ideas of how you might lay out your system. Sunlight calculators, it's really good to know where your sun is, as Ruth talked about. How to do your structure, water pressure testing. And so you'll see that there's all kinds of information, and I think that's in our resource list. So sorry to rush, I just want to make sure I leave time for the second half. Any questions?
There's one Zoom question.
Yeah.
How do you water in winter without things freezing with drip irrigation?
I don't water with drip irrigation because we get cold enough that it can either burst the line or you have a real problem at your faucet. I hand water, and it's really important to water plants when we're going to get a freeze because it protects the roots. It's counterintuitive to me, but they need to stay wet, not soggy, but moist. So I just hand water. At our house, we have 6 water catchment barrels. So I often will just water with a watering can once the barrels thaw. So, and I would say like every 10 days, every week to 10 days, but just check your soil. The easiest is to check your soil. And if it's super dry, give them water. Anybody else? Yeah.
This year, because it was so hot, I replaced a bunch of my 1/4-inch connectors, not connectors, but tubing. And what I could find locally in most places, in fact, I even ordered some online, when it gets hot, it gets soft and it'll pop off.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And there is some stuff that I did find that stays on. It's like, your stuff, and when it's hot, it doesn't get like spaghetti.
Yeah.
You know, and so do you have recommendations on the best choice?
Well, I am a big fan of DripWorks. All of their, like, this is heavy duty 1/4-inch. The other thing is put mulch over your irrigation line wherever you can to keep it a little bit cooler. And I meant to say with trees and shrubs, the other thing I've started doing is making watering rings out of this 1/4-inch. Traditionally, we just had like shrublers that went straight to one part of the tree or the shrub. And I find that putting this in the drip zone of the tree all the way around and using a 1/4-inch T. So this is my main 1/4-inch plain line. And then both ends of the 1/4-inch emitter plug into that T.
You use largely 1 foot or 6-inch.
It depends.
Just repeat it.
Oh, do I use mostly 6-inch?
6-inch or
Right.
12-inch.
Or 9-inch, I think it comes in. So the 1/4-inch comes with the emitter spaced at 6-inch, 9-inch, and 12-inch.
Yes.
And so does the 1/2-inch pipe. If it's like a flower pot, I probably am going to use 6-inch. And I also use these awesome little, they're little valves. Is it this one?
This is what you can turn on.
That you can, so I have these little 1/4-inch valves that dial the water down or all the way on so that I can adjust how much water I'm getting into a flower pot. But I want to make sure I'm getting regular amounts of water all the way around the pot, or say a raised vegetable bed, I would use 6-inch as well. 12-inch I might use if I'm running it through a perennial bed or a big tree. Like then I only need every 12 inches.
And then with most things, over time, with our hard water, we get buildups of salts and solids. How long does a line usually last for you?
So mine here is in its 3rd year and it seems to be doing okay, but I think a filter will help somewhat with that. Part of the problem is just that our water is so alkaline, I guess, and so we get a lot of mineral buildup. The good thing about it is easy to replace parts of it, and it is pretty inexpensive, but it is plastic and it's going in the landfill. I had wondered if there's any way you can hook an injector up to your system and maybe run cider vinegar or baking soda or something through my system to try to clean some of that buildup out.
Do you have any problems with rodents eating your lines?
Not yet, but I have heard of that. And I did have to replace a complete system at a house where they had puppies. And the puppies annihilated the system. Like I would get it all, I felt like whack-a-mole because I'd get all the leaks and then I would turn it back on and then they're sprouting up everywhere as all the gunk came out of the system. So, but keeping it under mulch maybe would help a little bit with the rodents too. I don't know. I really don't know how to deal with them.
Could you give us a specific example of what you would do on a tree? Like if it's a 1/2 inch foot apart, how long you might water that? Because, you know, it might be a 1/2 gallon per hour.
Yeah.
Just a typical one.
Yeah.
I mean, is it like a 2 or 3 hour watering?
If it's a really established tree that is going to need deep watering irregularly, I would run it for an hour and test your soil and see how deeply it has soaked in. And then I also just watch for signs of stress in the trees. I just took a course on eco landscaping, and he said it's better to let them stress a little bit because it makes them seek the water. So I think that's just trial and error. The question was how long to run the system for trees. And I would say start with an hour, and probably when it's really hot, I would water like every 4 or 5 days, probably. Just watch if they're broadleaf, if they start to wilt a little bit, let them go another day and then water them. And for perennials, I water just 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night. And in the heat of the summer, I'm doing that every day because they don't have the root system to get down. And most of us have pretty well draining soil. Mine's like sandy loam, so the water just goes right through it. And so I want to make sure they're having plenty of water to start the day and then some water at night to help them recover. And my garden is doing really well. And that's all the gardens I've done that with are doing well. I had my trees on that system, my new trees, and I just had to move some and the roots are like that. That was my mistake on the trees. So now they're going on their own zone. I want to make sure there's time for Wendy, and if there's any leftover questions at the end, we can address those. Thank you.
I hope you all had a quick nap. So I'm Wendy, and of course Manny. We're with Los Alamos County, so we're going to chat with you a little bit about the really complex system that if it were me, I would probably hire a contractor to come in and put in a tree irrigation system. So if you've ventured out at your home or anywhere else and tried anything like that on your own, it can be a little alarming, just trying to trench properly and all the things that come along with it. So we're going to be tag teaming as we go along. Manny is really the expert. I'm the PowerPoint presentation girl. So that's going to kind of be my job to some degree, but okay. So the first one is, why do you want an irrigation system at your home? So that would be the bigger question. So for an area where water conservation is a really big key player in New Mexico, and really probably most of the United States as the world now, as we're in a hotter climate, what is the purpose of the irrigation system? What is it going to serve? What are you trying to plant? And I think Dana did a great job in talking about all the different things that you can do. So that's your first questions you're going to ask, is just identifying that need. And just so you guys know, I see you keep taking pictures, which is totally fine, but Abby's going to actually post these on the website as well, so you'll have access to all of the information. So is irrigation the best use for your area? And would a xeriscape garden be more efficient? So you kind of have to ask those kind of things. And then, is a contractor required, or is this truly a homeowner project? For me personally, it wouldn't be something that I would try to bite off. And as we kind of go through the presentation, you'll kind of see the complexities of really putting in an irrigation system yourself. And then you would just have to make that call. So the home irrigation system, landscaping, it does not require a permit from Los Alamos County. However, homeowners should contact 811. I know y'all are shocked this morning.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a permit. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? So now you can go back and report out that you have just found out there's one thing in the county that does not require a permit. And I actually called and checked on it because I thought it did too. But yeah, so you'll call and at least get locates to come out and just check and make sure that if you are going to venture out and be brave and do this yourself, that you don't end up hitting an electric line, which wouldn't be good, or something crazy down there, a water line. Who knows? I mean, just working for the county 1.5 years now, we've stumbled amongst other things that I'm just in shock on days. Nothing that was supposed to be there, and it's like, oh, where'd that come from? So kind of interesting.
Key irrigation components, such as irrigation project plans and mapping out, such as what you would need in and throughout the household or around the areas. Designing your soil type, your controllers, backflow preventers, different types, different uses, from an AVB all the way to an RP. RP is just if you have wash stations and stuff like that, it doesn't allow chemicals to back siphon, versus an AVB is like an air gap or atmospheric breaker that it's just the highest point of the landscaping and does not let water press back. Valves, valve boxes, master valves, zone valves, irrigation heads, and maintenance.
So those are going to be our big key points that we're going to talk about as we keep moving forward. So planning for your irrigation system. And I cheated. I didn't draw that out. I just pulled one off of the internet that I found that looked pretty good. So there it is. But that is going to be your first step, or maybe your second. Your first one really is, do you need an irrigation system at home? Because, you know, being from Texas, I can tell you, we have 2 temperatures there, hot and hotter. Here, you got cold and colder in the winter, and it freezes. I mean, it's some hard winters here. We don't have that at home, you know, so you may have 4 days, 5 tops out of the year in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where you're really going to drop below that 32-degree mark. Here, not so much. It don't play. It gets cold in the teens and the 20s here. So yeah, that would be a really big thing you would want to think about as you're looking at an irrigation system in the yard and all the things that come along with it. But planning for the irrigation system, all the measurements, which would be including your trees, shrubs, your driveway, walkways, your shed, patio, etc. And Dana kind of touched on that a little bit. So you would really have to kind of map out your whole landscape of where you're going to need the irrigation to be and what that's going to look like. What do you need watered? You know, how do you work around the driveway and the patios and all the things that you have? You know, my home in Texas, I've repaired a couple of things myself, and some went okay, some not so much. And I ended up having to call my irrigator guy to come out. And then all he said to me is, Wendy, you shouldn't touch the plumbing. You shouldn't touch the irrigation. You shouldn't touch the electrical. So it was like my 3rd strike and I was out. So I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So if it's something relatively easy, I'll mess with it. If not, I kind of leave it alone and leave that to the experts. But make your drawing to a scale and on graph paper. So probably some of you have done that before, just even on different projects. I mean, I have in my backyard before, just kind of drawing out different plants and schemes of things that I think would look good. And of course, in my head, it always looks much better than reality sometimes once I get into the trenches of it, but you know, it looked good up there initially. And then just label different areas of the yard, including your lawn, flower beds, container plants, etc. Each area will represent a different watering zone with the sprinkler heads per watering zone as required. So my home in Texas, I have 6 different zones and a little bit different on a couple of them. And then also have a drip irrigation in one area where I have a couple of Japanese maples and different trees that need a little bit more love than some of the stuff. And again, you know, totally 2 different environments because it gets super hot there. I've shared with these guys a couple of times, it'd be 115 degrees and with the humidity feels like 125. So it's like, you know, when people tell me it's hot here, I'm like, no, this is still pretty cool. Let me show you hot. This is hot. So yeah, just the difference in the 2 states is just unbelievable. All right, so let me talk about your soil type.
Determining soil type. There are several different ways to determine your soil type, whether it's sand, loamy, or clay you have in your yard. All it takes is a clean empty jar with a lid, some clean water, tablespoon of detergent, and some sample of the soil that you want to test. First, fill your jar about 1/3 waist full of soil that you want to test. Fill the jar with water and detergent, then cap it off. Shake the jar gently and then set aside for several hours or even over a night. And this will determine as you get through your layers, the heavier it is, clay, your loamy, and then the sand, the lightest will start filtering up and you'll start seeing everything percolate through everything. Your water will be at the top. A good instance of it is just might go several places throughout the yard, take different samples.
Okay, so this is an example of an irrigation controller. So there's a ton of different types out there. But this needs the 120 volts to connect into an irrigation time and transfer to 24. And it can get a little complex, as you can see. So that's why as we're talking about irrigation systems, it might be something that you might not want to test the waters initially yourself unless you're really confident on a bunch of things and feel like you can get it done.
So on this system here, you can see that it says common wire. That is your white wire. That will be daisy chained or paralleled through each of your valves. The single different color wires that are there are to demonstrate each valve that is there. So if you wanted one for the front, one for the back, you would label it zone 1, 2, 3, or depending on the type of programmer you'd have, front yard, backyard, side, however, gardens, stuff like that. And with this system, when you are getting your power, when the water supply is coming through the bottom of the port, that is your main line. As it comes up, everything that stops it is the valve itself. So by you turning on the controller to each zone will indicate which zone kicks on and for the period of time that you would like. So if you have it for 15 minutes, the moment it feels satisfied with the 15 minutes on that zone, it'll shut off and it'll either turn off completely or go to the next zone that is adjacent.
And is that bottom line pressurized all the time?
Yes, that is a main line that's pressurized. It comes up to the valve body that is there. We did bring 2 different variables. We have a big commercial version that is a 2-inch PVB hunter. And then we have a small homeowner edition 3/4 EVB that's here. And up here, this is where up there that you would see, these are both continuity wires, so they will tag team. Either one will be a common and one will be a hot. They work in parallel. This is a solenoid. It has a magnet plunger at the bottom. When it sends electricity, it picks up the magnet, letting water flow up and over the body, pushing pressure down on the valve body to allow water to go through. When it shuts off, it lets the electricity go, drops the magnet, shuts off the valve. Irrigation coverage.
Sorry.
Head-to-head coverage is the term that is often used. the head-to-head coverage on an irrigation system is usually a gapping or an overlay. And usually we want it, depending on the side of the, if it's a spray head, it's within 1 to 2 feet. If it's a rotary, something that possibly is having more pressure to spray, we're doing a 4-foot overlap. And that is to variables like wind, sun, water pressure, and people that are utilizing the area that might not know that it would be on, and adjusting heads, kicking it, stepping on them. When you push pressure down on one, you push pressure down the line. So now you increase the velocity of that one head. Backflow, irrigation backflow preventers. Backflow preventers, in most systems, the water flow in one direction. Sometimes water can switch directions, creating a backflow. There's many reasons, and this is essential.
Oops. Perfect timing, huh?
That's dispatch.
Okay, go grab that. Okay, yeah, that call's probably essential too. I have no idea what it is, but it's probably not good. All right, so, yeah, so many reasons why it's essential to avoid, including contaminated water flowing back into the city or county water supply. Having a backflow preventer is critical to your irrigation system, and a testable backflow device is now a mandatory requirement for most areas. So, and you all understand if you don't have a backflow preventer and something gets back into your main supply line, that's pretty bad news. So you've probably seen county staff out this week. We've already shut water off pretty much across the system with the hard freezes that came through. And we are going through this process right now of the commercial backflow preventers, which are huge. You've probably seen the one at Ashley Pond as you're driving down Central. If you look right there to your left, maybe right across from Bathtub Row, there's a big, huge backflow preventer there. So we've already drained those. We pulled water out, and now this week we started flushing all the lines and blowing everything out. And then we'll shut everything down completely. We'll cover all those backflow preventers and protect them during the winter time. And then waters won't be turned back on until May of next year. So a lot of people in the county don't really understand why we do that, but with the hard freezes, you have to do that. And for those running around this spring, you might have seen us digging up at Western Park, community soccer. We had multiple lines that blew this past winter from the temperatures getting so cold. And that's a pretty good indicator that we failed a little bit on our end and we didn't blow those lines out like they should have been. So maybe instead of that 4 to 6 minute time frame of blowing air through, we only hit a 3 to 4 minute. So it didn't get all the water out, and we had a lot of cracked lines. So that's a really good motivator for staff to make sure they do that correctly 100%, because I would much rather spend extra time blowing out a line than spending 2.5 days digging up a line and making the repair and then covering everything back up. So, yeah.
No, did you go through the different types?
No, I did not.
So
No.
on backflow preventers, there's several types. We have an AVB, is an atmospheric breaker. We have a double check that allows pressure to go one way that has flaps. It does not let pressure come back. You have your RP, and that has a relief valve. So it has a little mechanism at the back. When pressure comes back, it dumps water. So it doesn't allow siphoning to come back in. You have an air gap. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So this would be an atmospheric breaker. So as pressure comes back, it shoots water out of the little jet ports to not allow contamination back into the.
Is that part of the hose field?
Yes.
And are those replaceable?
Yes, they are. And they will wear out as our watering system that we have here. Yes. And then most pressure with these is a household is about 50 to 55 PSI. You're turning on a zone that doesn't have nothing, water hammer occurs, and there's a little check ball that you can kind of hear kind of going back and forth that will actually get debris and it'll wear eventually.
These are like $15 instead of $350.
Yeah. Yes. We'll use an example for our cemetery is a 4-inch line. It was $9,500. Wow. Yes. But it supplies 90 PSI And we have 16 zones, and on each zone is 7 heads. Each head takes about 18 gallons just to get the throw at 55 feet from head to head. Irrigation valve boxes and irrigation valve boxes. Sprinkler valve boxes will be there where the wires will be situated, the manifold, the valves are essentially located. The valve box can either be installed flush with the grass or underneath the mulch in a garden. So some of them are hidden, some of them will be directly flush to them. It's important to know where you locate. Even if we're making a drawing or putting an indicator somewhere to identify where the valve boxes are as weeds or mulch comes in, and the more we add, the more we can, it's hard to find them, they disappear.
Is that full of rocks?
Yes, that is a drainage system. It's a French drain. So as we winterize, there is a bleeder valve that is located at the top. You would release it and let the water percolate out. As the heat comes and transitions warms cold, it'll actually siphon this out to not create a problem and destroy the valve body.
You ever put that gravel in to keep the gophers or other stuff out of the box?
No, it's more of a drainage system, so you don't get weeds, contamination. Without that, water will sit in there and you'll have a nice big
So
pool.
this has a bottom. It's not just.
No, it's open. They're all open. All valve boxes are open.
What is the criteria for turning off? I guess you have so many days below freezing. And then in the spring, what is the criteria for turning the water back on to the ground?
Okay, so the question's about the criteria turning the water off in the winter and spring?
So we turn off the water when we get below freezing. We do have our irrigation set below freeze level. So in our area that we're at is 18 to 24. With that, our irrigation lines are below freezing level, but still we have backflow preventers. So anything that rises, anything 10 inches and above, they actually get covered. The test ports get opened and let all water out of there. As we get a chance for our irrigation like we are doing now, we put unions or it's male threads on male threads with a nut in the middle, so you can spin it off and you're not disassembling the whole top. That gets removed. We put air pressure and we blow out the lines. And then after we're done, all our systems have a low end drain or the lowest area in it. We'll go and open up that shutoff valve. So whatever debris or anything's left, it comes out. And then after so many period days, we'll go in there and we'll shut off the low end drain.
Do you know if you do this at our down garden?
Yes, there is.
And so you were saying that essentially, is it first freeze that you do this, or do you try and predict before this freeze happens, or do you wait till you actually get a day of freeze then?
So the question was, how do we prevent or how do we prepare for the freeze and thaw? If we do it prior or after the first freeze. And for us, we look at the weather and we shut off water when we know we're going to get right at that 30-degree mark. 32 for us, some of our bigger systems, they'll hold because the mass amount of water that's flowing through the pipes, it creates enough friction to keep us from freezing or keep enough water flow. So it's that 30-degree mark and below. Oh, I didn't do the master valves.
Okay.
Irrigation master valve. The master valve is in line and it is there to protect from damaging or loss of water. It is an electrical valve that is located on the main line water supply. It is the first valve in line after a backflow preventer. It reduces water loss. It helps to prevent water leaking or leak of water pressure. The master valve can help prevent or provide turning off the mainline water supply. So if it is going into like a housing or another facility with this in line, you're not shutting off the domesticated water to whatever it is feeding. With this main line, you would just shut the valve off or the flow control, and you could do repairs if needed. Irrigation valve zones. Zone valves, the zone valves turn on each section of irrigation system known as zones. Types of zones that can be run are one at a time. Your controller will turn on each zone valve for a set period of time until the area is satisfied with the water. The zone valves are fed by the pressurized line and hold back the water from pressurizing the line until the controller tells it when to kick on. When the valve actuates, it allows water into the zone line and into the sprinkler or drip system to run. So this is the brain of everything. Even with no power to the controller, you could actually go and open the bleeder valve, and this allows more head pressure that what the electronic part of the solenoid would do, and you can actually manually open it in each box and run water through the system. If there was an issue with power or you cannot troubleshoot it, and you're trying to make sure that it's not a clog in the line, it's not something that got turned off, you could just check it by overriding it with the bleeder valve. So irrigation head types. There are fixed sprayers. This would be a Hunter spray. So the head will pop up when it gets pressurized. There will be a fixed nozzle that you can have quarter, halves, or full circles. They come in, or in our, what we would order is 8, 10s, and 12s, and that is feet of throw. So from head pressure to where the droplets would get to, and you can adjust. And if you place it, these have a little spring in there. You could crank it if you are a half, or they make some that are adjustable. If you have a corner angle that's at a different degree, more than your 45, 90, or 180, or your 360, they actually make adjustables that are for that. We have rotary heads. These are called Hunter PGPs. These are shrubs. This is where the base would go. It always stays up protruded. So as it throws, there's already a angle that allows for higher shrubs. So you are not getting weeds or establishing them to pop up and growing over your shrubs and not being able to see or adjust them. For usually a landscape, for a lawn area, this would be a rotary, and this is flush to the ground. When water pressure comes, it has a spring, it pops up, and water pressure will allow it to rotate in the configurations that you need. Most spray heads, the rise is 2, 4s, 6s, and even 12s for the height that it could come up. So if you're at a lower end and you needed a higher throw radius, they do make a height, head heights adjustable. The rotary that we have for most common lawns like households would probably be between 17 and 37. A sweet spot is about 28 feet. Our bigger systems that we run in our park system, this is a 1-inch feeding it. So we do 55 is what we target, 55 feet in between head to head. So from one sprinkler to another, we'll have 100 feet.
do those specifically for water grading well between the head and the
Yes.
edge of the arc?
Yes, so on the tops of it, we have a nozzle type. There's 4 different types. And each variable, the bigger the nozzle, the more the water dumps out. The smaller the nozzle, the farther the throw, but the least amount of water pressure coming out. And then it has adjustment for your arc. And these have two variables. We have a throw, and then we have the mist that's in the front.
So these are just more photos of things that we've kind of already talked about, so we'll jump through that. Okay. Yeah, we can jump through that too.
Yeah.
And so just maintenance.
Irrigation maintenance. The system requires maintenance during the lifespan. Preventive maintenance is needed to avoid from damage or expensive cost. By doing so, it keeps the system running a lot longer, a lot cleaner, and it runs better. Removing around the heads, cleaning the areas, making sure monthly or yearly as you're going through is just keeping that there's no tripping hazards. These will be on a swing joint, so they articulate when people step on them, they will not crush and break. With that, if it's spraying and somebody might kick it or something, it adjusts from left to right. During the winter months, make sure that the system gets winterized. It can be a challenge with freezing temperatures coming throughout. We want to make sure that the pipes don't crack and freeze and break. So in our situations, we do apply air pressure to the systems to blow it out, make sure that the drainage is open until a period of days, then we shut down everything. And if you're not too sure with your system, you could always call professional. There is quite a few landscapers throughout our district here that would be more than willing to help you or assist you with either installing or just winterizing.
Okay, now the last couple of slides, this one's just a resource slide, and again, this will be posted on the website, so you'll have access to it. And then just thank you. Any questions? Follow-up questions at all? Okay, alright, perfect.
Question, some of the county's smaller lines, I assume you have maybe some 3/4 or 1-inch line. Do you use PVC or ABS for the pipe?
They are poly pipe.
Okay, so it's got a little bit of flexibility.
Yes,
to it?
yes, it does.
I just wanted to say real quick, Wendy had on that last slide, our water rule W8. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Abby with Department of Utilities. That's my thing. That does not apply when you're establishing plants. So it is our water restriction encouraged water restriction that you only water on certain days before 10 a.m. after 5 p.m. That's mostly so you're not evaporating all the water you're putting on the ground. But I just wanted to make it clear that that it doesn't apply when you're establishing plants, so don't fret about that. And then, oh my gosh, I forgot about the second thing.
I have a question. Can we use gray water? Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you're following the state of New Mexico's gray water regulations,
Okay.
you can do it.
We have some of those printed pamphlets if you're interested. And so if you come on irrigation.
And I don't remember my other point. Okay.
Alrighty, thank you.
I have a question. Yeah. There are days when I feel like overall, I feel like spirit of the law I'm following, letter of the law I'm not. I have to leave for work at 7:30 in the morning, so I do like I do my front in the morning, and then I go one morning, and then I do my back the next morning, because I can't get up well the bears, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't go out in the dark, so.
There's nobody out enforcing this. It's also for the health of your yard. You don't want to be overwatering it. But that reminds me of what else I was gonna say. So if you do have an irrigation system, regardless of whatever it is, and you have it set up on a timer, we encourage you to enroll in our leak alerts on your automated meter infrastructure portal through utilities. That way, if you're on vacation or in the middle of the night, your system breaks, it'll send you an alert. And one of the good things about that is that if you are on vacation, you can still water whatever needs watered. And then if something does leak or alert, utilities, if they see an alert and they can't get a hold of you, will automatically shut off your water. Because they don't want your house, we don't know where the leak is. We don't want your house flooding. If it's your irrigation, we don't want you wasting all that water. Or if you get the alert first, because you can get it sent via text, email, whatever, you can call utilities and say, can you turn off my water? And then I'll deal with it when I get back. So that's just one of the things I wanted to plug, that we don't have to fret about your, whatever you're landscaping while you're on vacation, you can still do it, but have a leak alert set up.
And you can set up.
It's called the Automated Meter Infrastructure Portal System. If you go to utilities website, you can find it. It's the AMI system.
Okay.
And then under that, once you have access to it if you have a utility account, and once you get logged in, you'll see alerts on the left-hand side, and it'll walk you through.
That reminds me too, in my resources, there's information about weather-based additions you can put on your irrigation system. So if it starts raining, it'll shut your system off while it's raining. So in the resources, there are links to a whole bunch of information about that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.